Every company is undergoing some kind of transformation. Whether you're upgrading your tech stack, migrating cloud, analyzing process to improve your employee experience, every enterprise is saddled with the need to improve their systems. But what if that daunting process was a thing of the past? What if instead of having to undergo massive technology upgrades, that process was just continuous? If you ask Jon Knisley, Principal Consultant, Automation and Process Excellence at FortressIQ, that's the way of the future.
Process data is kind of that missing puzzle piece that nobody's had access to. And I think once we get it in place, that's when I think you'll have a complete and comprehensive understanding of your organization, how it truly operates. And I'm starting to play with this idea that when we get to that point, is that going to be the end of our digital transformation journey?
The end of digital transformation sounds too good to be true, but is it? In this episode of IT Visionaries, Jon explains why the reality of continuous systems improvement through the use of automation tools, it's really not that far off. Plus, Jon drives into data-driving insights, powering continuous transformation across enterprises, and why employees should embrace automation tools. Enjoy.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by Salesforce Platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Innovate fast, empower every employee, and scale with confidence from anywhere, with a customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.
Welcome everyone to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today we have the Principal Automation and Process Excellence Leader at FortressIQ, Jon Knisley. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me on the program, Albert. Look forward to the conversation.
All right. I want to get right into it. There's something you write about quite a bit on LinkedIn. You call it process intelligence. FortressIQ is also in this domain. What is process intelligence?
So process intelligence is about the automatic and continuous acquisition of process data. And we're doing it at speed and at scale across every process, every application, every department. And the goal is really to provide fast and clear and accurate visibility into the current state of your organization's processes. You know, we want to eliminate those unknowns to really enable companies to better plan and better execute. And the whole idea is if you don't understand your current state, it is so hard to get to that magical future state. And if you step back and, think about it logically, it makes sense. You can't get from point A to point B if you don't know where point A is, if you don't know where you're starting from. Google Maps can get you from Boston to New York pretty easily, tell you how long it takes, if there are tolls, if there's an option to take a plane. But if you just say, hey, I want to go to New York, it can't help you at all because it doesn't know where you are currently. And it's no different for an organization. And, fundamentally, people don't understand how their organization truly functions at that granular user activity level. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
So it sounds similar to business process mining. I've heard that term before. Is this a similar domain or are those two things separate?
Similar domain. Process mining technically involves access to log files on specific applications. And, what we found is a lot of applications that people spend a lot of their time on don't have log files. And so it makes process mining very difficult. So the technology and tool that we use is a small software agent, gets installed on target desktops, records all the activity that goes on the screen. And then ultimately that information gets used by artificial intelligence and computer vision and natural language processing, all sorts of other technologies. And we convert that unstructured image data into structured data that we can then go mine and analyze. So we get a very complete picture of the process from end to end, as opposed to some process mining technologies that it can only look at and explore certain applications.
Okay, so I think I understand this.
So long story short, same domain, but slightly different approach to getting the same type of information.
No, I like what I'm hearing. I want to use an actual use case I just recall because it quantified something for me so easily. And then I want to bring it and have you explain it to me back in the FortressIQ world, because I think this applies. So I remember being in a conference once where the I don't know who was in charge, but they were talking about Intuit, and they examined all the customer complaints. And the customer complaints, they realized, all came from life-changing events, because life-changing events typically require you to get paperwork. That's where everyone's getting hung up on the TurboTax product. And so what they did through all this survey data, long form survey data, was they said, okay, this is where everyone is getting hung up. Let's move these life-changing event questions to the front. And they noticed that their call center volume dropped. So it sounds like with a product like FortressIQ, where you guys are in the business of, these tools didn't have log files. So business process mining can't quite get that. But you would see that every time someone called, for example, that they were logging their computer that, hey, this is a life change event. And like you can see calls pick up when they got to this page across different software applications. Am I thinking about this correctly, where you could actually study someone's computer and see what they're doing versus like in their call tool versus their logging tool, their customer service tool, where you're then able to see like, holy cow, all the bottlenecks happen in these window of events. And that's where we need to solve that problem. Is that kind of how the software and the process works?
You're thinking about it the right way. And, no business process, especially today, occurs within a single application, or very few, let's say.
Yeah.
And so, what we find is people are jumping from Excel to email to their core system to their ERP system. And so you need to be able to look at all that activity across the board. And there's some tools, BPM tools that sit a little, call it higher up and can look at that overall process, but they don't tell you exactly how the work gets done. And because we're looking at those individual screens, and we can provide you stepwise, images of those activities, you can then track that activity very granularly, exactly how it gets done. One way to think about it, the analogy that we use sometimes is sort of the factory analogy. And some of those business process tools, the mining tools, the BPM tools, they can tell you, how the car moves down the factory floor. Mm-hmm. Okay, it spends this much time in the chassis area, it spends this much time in the painting area, it spends this much time in the finishing area. What those tools can't tell you is how the paint actually gets applied. And that's what our tool is essentially doing. It tells you how those individual steps and how those individual stages get accomplished. So then you can go back later on and make improvements to the process, find where your bottlenecks are, make it a more frictionless experience in the use case with Intuit that you referenced, whatever the desired outcome is on the business side.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share an example that you might have of a company that, let's say they didn't know what they didn't know until they installed your application. They're like, oh, okay, I've just now uncovered something that I need to solve. I'd love to hear an example of that so that we can get a better picture of what this is.
Yeah, so let me give you two examples, and I'll give you sort of a higher level and then a sort of lower level. So we'll go top down and then bottom up. So one organization that we're working with, last year, over the course of 5 months, we observed about 60 different people across different business units and recorded 57 million events.
Okay.
When we looked at all that information, aggregated it all together, again, it's all computer based. So we're taking advantage of sort of the big data capabilities. When we aggregated it all together, over 60% of the time, so clear majority of time, was spent in, call them the productivity apps, Excel, email, Word, PDF, all applications that don't necessarily create a log file or a record of the activity. Now, if I was the CEO or the chief operating officer, I'm spending millions of dollars every year on systems of record, and a majority of my employees' time is not even in those systems. At the end of the day, all that knowledge in my organization is walking out the door. If I want to build AI models in the future, none of that data is being captured. If I want to outsource a process in the future, my workflow is so unstructured, I can't outsource it. I'd have to fix that process before. So, that's an example of sort of a high level insight that we can drive from the tool. Now, let me go from the other side, from sort of the bottoms up. 2 cases last year that we had, different companies. Each time we were asked to observe a cohort of 10 individuals. Maybe one was 10, one was 12. I can't remember the exact specifics on it. In each case, they said, hey, this cohort does the exact same thing. They're all doing a financial services reporting or transaction process. but in general, the cohort of 10, 12 people should be doing the exact same thing. In each case, we observed, came back, looked at the data, did a readout for them. We come back and we said, hey, we know you said all 10 of these people are doing the same thing. Only 3 of the people were actually in the core business system. The other 7 didn't even touch it. And reading the room and seeing the eyes, like, all of a sudden the eyes pop up, be like, how do they know that? And we don't know that, and that's a real eye opener. And so people say, hey, is this a performance management tool? I mean, you can use the data how you want, but the fact is that we're giving you this incredibly granular insight in terms of what actually goes on in your organization that you've never had the ability to access before. And that's the result of, new technology that, you couldn't do this stuff, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So we're sort of at the bleeding edge of this, but this is really the way that we see, this sector moving very quickly.
So what are some of the outcomes that companies have when they uncover these things? Because that's a great example. I tell you to take a study of my top 10 performers. You tell me, hey, 7 out of my top 10 don't even use my core business systems. My first thought process was, because my immediate reaction was thinking, well, John, what do these guys do? And and what are they doing so unique? Can I teach it to other people? I feel like I could get an advantage there. And that's how my mind starts going. But I'd love to hear what your customers are doing with this information.
And that's exactly it. Sometimes it's a reskilling opportunity. Hey, here's a massive bottleneck, and we found somebody who just found a better way to do it. So yeah, the outcomes come in various ways. A lot of our work very early on was in sort of the automation and the RPA space. But we're seeing more and more companies use it for that sort of continuous improvement type model. We've got organizations using it now for compliance applications and putting together compliance reports that need to go to the SEC on stock trading information on requests that come in. Compliance, customer experience, looking to create a more frictionless customer experience. Your example with, the Intuit application aligns with that, really across the board. I mean, it can be used to drive any key business initiative because, again, anytime you want to improve, you have to know what your current state is before you can get to that, improved future state.
What is the appetite for implementing something like this? Because on one hand, it sounds ultra useful. If I was a business leader and I have, I'm a business leader at Mission, we have processes here. I'd love to get better at it. We're not perfect. I know that. But then I also think about, do people feel like it's an invasion of privacy? What are some of the things that people don't maybe understand much about? Because it sounds like the software application will record and examine everything I'm doing, but I know it's not a violation of privacy, but I'd love for you to explain why it's not.
Yeah, great question. And a topic that comes up in every conversation we have around security. And ultimately, a lot of it depends on the culture of the organization. And that is a major element of it. Now, we've got a lot of safeguards built into the tool to allow you to, allow or deny certain applications that you can decide to record information on. We've also got a masking appliance in there as well that you can strip out any personally identified information as well. Some organizations want to know or want to train the people how to turn it on and off, if that's, what they're looking to do, if there's a concern on that side. So, from our perspective, we're flexible in how people approach it and recognize that each organization is going to be different and unique in terms of how they want to address the sort of data security and data privacy issue. On the flip side, the traditional way of getting a lot of this information was through workshops or interview sessions or time and motion studies. Those are a major disruption on the workforce as well. And, you could either have somebody looking over your shoulder, recording everything you do, or you can have, the computer essentially do it and make the data anonymous at a certain level. So, people have been exposed to this for a while. And, I think it's, part of the new world we live in that, you've got to, address some of these concerns. And again, it comes down to, trust and faith in your organization and the technology.
No, that makes total sense. When it comes to developing the application or on the functional side and how it works, one of the things is I think about is applications that are on my system that actually end up slowing down my system, right? I'm sure that's a major concern because it feels like this would be recording quite a bit of information. And therefore, I don't know how it works, but is it taking up a ton of RAM? Do I need a specific RAM number to on my hardware machine to make sure this is working and functional? Because I think about, we've all been there using Google Chrome, maybe in a meeting, and you're like, geez, my computer has crawled to like an inoperable state.
Yeah, no, it is a very lightweight software agent that gets installed on the target desktops. It's, I think, a 2.5 meg download.
Oh, that's nothing. 2.5.
Yeah, it uses 2-3% of computer resources. I think it's less than 10 kilobytes per second of data transfer. So there's almost zero impact on the network or on the computer system. And, we're not necessarily, unless we're talking about some compliance applications, again, we need to capture enough data to make this a big data problem and get all the variations and all the permutations of a potential process. We don't need it on everybody's machine. If you've got 50, 60 people doing a, end of the month close process or doing, invoice processing, we only need to record, 10, 12 of those people for 2 weeks, depending on the frequency of the application. If this is something they do, 50 times a day, we may not even need 2 weeks of data to get enough of that information to figure out, okay, here's the universe of how this process is completed. So then I can, do an automation faster, or I can figure out a more streamlined way to do that process. So it is not necessarily a continuous ongoing recording that we need if that's the application that you're looking to use it on.
Yeah, so I want to read something from the company, from the company literature, and then I want you to explain how this works, because I'm really fascinated because you've mentioned how lightweight this is. You're only capturing enough data to make it useful, to make a decision. It says that FortressIQ is the creator of a cognitive automation platform powering and accelerates digital transformation through imitation learning, using an innovative type of AI that combines computer vision, natural language, and sequence modeling. And you learn how business functions live through live activity analysis. So let's use that end of the month close. Walk me through what the system's recording. And then, definitely for our audience, we'd love to hear some of the things that you guys have uncovered and helped improve.
So the, process is the same regardless of, what the target application or outcome that we're looking to drive or capture is.
Okay.
So we get a percentage of people doing the process, and we need to get enough data to capture it effectively. And here's where, it's a bit of art and science based on experience comes in that we, help guide the client with to make sure we do capture enough information to get good data to be able to map and discover the processes along with all the different variations and permutations that come up to be able to, either execute an automation more efficiently or streamline a workflow to make it work better, or provide the information to train another team on this process. It varies depending on, how often the process is completed, how many people are doing it, what the complexity of it is. And that, all sorts of, gets put together to determine, what the right amount of data that we need to capture and how many cycles we need to go through to be able to get that information, to be able to map and discover all those processes. I think different outcomes that we've seen from people. I mentioned the compliance opportunity where we automated, that workflow. And that was literally taking a woman 6 to 7 hours a day of what we would call swivel chair work, copy and pasting information from an email, putting it into an Excel spreadsheet, putting it then into a web-based application that would go search the database, pulling that information back into a text report, and then processing that information back, to the regulatory authority. As you can expect, she was a little concerned of like, hang on, you're going to automate everything I do. You're going to automate me out of work. But I think that's where, this question of, the role of automation in the world today comes from. Everybody's trying to do more with less. Nobody's got time. And as much as possible, if we can shift work from lower value to higher value work, we've got a massive opportunity to improve employee experience, improve productivity in the organization, and really, sort of make everybody's life a bit better.
So that's something that we've heard from the different automation intelligence companies, whether it's RPA, business process mining. That's something that people still continue to fear, which is this idea that your work is going to be automated and then removed. Obviously, that's not true. We've developed more technology it's obviously since the day of the plows, and we clearly have more jobs for more people. They just move. Like instead of us plowing fields now, we don't need to do that as much. We have tractors. So automation each time. Culturally, why do you think at companies there's like a fear level? Because the leaders typically want this, and then some of the just some of the team members tend to be like, they kind of get scared. So I wonder if they view you as like a scary thing. You're coming in like FortressIQ's coming.
Yeah, it's like what's that Office Space, and the Bobs come in to handle all the layoffs. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The woman I mentioned who we were doing the compliance with, after 3 days, she starts going, "Hey, can you guys also do this? And what about that?" It's like, she's like, "Man, I did not know how miserable my job was on a day-to-day basis until I didn't have to do it anymore." And I think, they're, different people have different motivations. Some people get very comfortable in the work they do, and any sort of change is a concern for them. I think you've got a situation, and I'm not a psychologist, but, you've got people who, I don't want to give up my domain of information because then I'm not going to be seen as the expert or the person who's so critical in their role. I've been in technology my whole life. So I just, that perspective for me is just so far off the norm. I can't imagine it. But, we did some work last year I did with a government agency, and I think they had like 67% of their employees were retirement eligible in the next 2 years.
That's a lot.
I mean, there was no way. And if I would tell you the government agency, you'd be like, okay, just let it shut down. That's perfectly fine. But, there was no way that this organization is going to survive if they don't bring in some of this technology to help automate the processes and the workflow and, capture some of this knowledge that these workers who've been there for, 30, 40 years have in their heads, and potentially they're looking at half their employees walking out in the next, 12, 18 months or so.
Yeah, we see that with a lot of different, that one organization you just named, the government institution, they're not alone. There's other companies that are facing that coming forward. Do you think this is going to accelerate the adoption of new technologies? Because one of the things that we've consistently heard from different organizations that have been on the show is that there are legacy companies using legacy systems. We don't have to call them legacy companies, but there's companies using legacy systems for sure. And they've kind of taken on this approach that if it's not really that broken, we don't need to really fix it. But then the world's moving faster and faster. People want more products and services all the time that are faster. Do you think, process intelligence is a way to unlock new knowledge so that they can make these investments to get off legacy systems? Or is this not necessary? Like people should just switch and then figure out using these systems to how to better use future systems? Because I didn't know, do legacy companies think about applying this to their tools? Because maybe they haven't thought about it, but I don't know. You have the experience here.
I mean, I think if you look at the, overall challenge of digital transformation, the success rates are miserable.
Yeah.
Every report puts it at about 30%. McKinsey came out not too long ago, and I think said 14%, only 14% of companies have seen a sustained and material improvement in their operations through the transformation.
That's not good.
Gartner came out not too long ago or, a while back and said that only 1% of companies, only 1% had enough insight on their processes to be able to take advantage of the digital solutions that they had in place. So I think, again, it sort of ultimately goes back to this challenge of companies fundamentally don't understand how they operate on a daily basis. They'll be able to tell you, oh yeah, we've got a procure to pay process. But if you say, okay, how's an invoice get created? Nobody can tell you that. And, this technology is what allows you to figure those things out so you can make those adjustments and, improve faster, have higher success rates in your transformation programs. It's a major issue, but, I think we're slowly seeing, some shift towards addressing it because, again, we all know that data-driven organizations win, and we've known that for a long time. all the way back to, Peter Drucker and, what gets measured gets improved. I think that was sort of our first journey on, insights in, hey, we need to be more data driven. I mean, that goes all the way back to the 50s.
Yeah.
A generation later, you had Michael Porter in Competitive Advantage talk about having a systematic way to assess processes and using that to drive competitive advantage. So these ideas have been around for a while, but there's been no way to really capture this data and act on it. And I think, the other sort of shift that we'll see is, to date, a lot of process work, whether it's process mapping, the traditional manual way of using consultants and BAs to explore and discover a process, to process mining, which we talked about earlier. There's some stuff called task discovery out there. It is all very episodic. It is time boxed at a certain point in time. And I think ultimately we're going to move towards a more continuous measurement. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. You don't put your security antivirus software on for 2 weeks and then turn it off because you're done. You don't put on Google Analytics on your website because you want to improve your customer experience for a month and then turn it off and move on.
Right.
No, those are continuous, real time, because the world's ever changing. Your applications are ever changing, your customers are ever changing, and you need to have this constant insight in terms of what's going on in your organization to make it better. And I think people say, hey, I'm already drowning in data. I've got financial information, I've got sales data, I've got operational data, I've got data coming from my ERP system, whatever it may be. I'm already data driven. But this process data is kind of that missing puzzle piece that nobody's had access to. And I think once we get it in place, whether it's us or similar technologies, that's when I think you'll have a complete and comprehensive understanding of your organization, how it truly operates. And, I'm starting to play with this idea that does that, when we get to that point, is that going to be the end of our digital transformation journey? There's always been this debate of whether, are we going to have an end of transformation, or is this just going to go on and this is the new way of doing business? And for a long time, I was like, no, this is just the new normal, as they say, and we're always going to be stuck with it. But, I'm starting to sort of think in my mind that no, if we can really lock down how companies operate and make adjustments to them in real time on an ongoing basis, we're going to be able to check the box on digital transformation, and then we can move on to what's next, and who knows what that's going to be. But that's the way I'm starting to think. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but they're in my mind, I'm starting to think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah,
it's an interesting point you bring up, because I equate it more like to websites, company websites, or when you talk to people in marketing, they say like, well, when's the website going to be done? It's like, well, it's actually never done. It's literally never done. Digital transformation probably is never done. Like the word is never. I think the word will get phased out. I think what it'll just be is continuous evolution of work. I think that's what we're heading towards. I'm curious, you had a lot of great points on what you're seeing in the market and what the future holds for companies. I'm curious today, when companies come to you, is it out of necessity and need, meaning like they have to figure out a solution to solve a process because they're getting bottlenecked? Or is it ambition to improve something that they don't know? Or you see like a 50-50 split? Or what would you say people currently, because I think eventually it'll just become a requirement. I think eventually companies that figure out their systems and processes will get so much more efficient than others that it makes me, if I'm the other, have to have a need. Like I have to now do this myself because I'm falling behind. I can't charge what the other people charge. I can't, service as many people as my competition services. So I'll have to figure out a way to do that, or just fall behind and die. But I know that right now we're in the middle of this transformation. So I didn't know if half the people coming to you were like, oh, I have a need, I can't keep up with my competitors, or half the people were saying, hey, I need to transform. I don't know why, but I just think I want to be more ambitious and take on the next evolution of what my company needs to do.
Great question. I would say that most of our work comes because there's a problem that they're trying to solve. It's not that pie in the sky, blue sky. Hey, I know I need this and I want to get better. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but it's a goal and I want to have sort of the complete and full understanding of my business. We've got, one client, I would say, who actually fits in that mold. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to use this data for, but I know it's important and I want to start getting used to it. But everybody else, it's like, hey, I've got this problem and I think you guys can solve it. Let me give you a real world example to sort of put it into perspective. One major client came to us and said, here's my problem. 18 months ago, I bought a license for 2,500 RPA bots from one of the major vendors. I'm 18 months into this thing. I've deployed 200 bots. I've got over 2,000 licenses just sitting on the shelf that I'm going to have to pay for again coming up soon. Can you guys help me solve this bottleneck? Can you help me find and identify opportunities where I can automate workflow more quickly and more efficiently? That was our very common use case, long time ago, last year, basically. But again, that sort of goes to this, I've got a problem and I think you guys can help fix it. Mm-hmm. And we see that in a bunch of areas, but there are a few that have sort of that blue sky hope of here's how we can address the challenge.
So what has there been a fundamental shift now of that's what it was a year ago? Has there been a change for what's going on today?
Yeah, I think people are starting to see how this information can get used better across their organization. And some of it just flat out, to be honest with you, our marketing. We've shifted from sort of a pure, hey, we can help you with your RPA journey to, hey, we can help you across your entire organization, because the more data you have about your organization, the better you guys can have outcomes, in a variety of areas. So, automation still very much a core use case, but we are seeing more interest in, the continuous improvement, compliance, experience, and just the general analytical value of our data.
Where do you see this type of technology? Do you see it going? So right now, it's primarily, I believe, in knowledge work. People that are knowledge workers, you name finance as an industry. I'm assuming most, accounts payable, procure to pay, that's all finance heavy based. Do you see this crossing skill sets? Could this be part of other companies, part of other processes? I guess, does it require a term? I guess everything's computerized now. So there's absolutely everything has a computer now. Every single process seems to have a computer. Is it going to evolve so that you got, your industry is now measuring, I'm trying to think of like a hotel, measuring how many people are being checked in, measuring how many people are flowing through the checkout process. I think of hotels because I think it's very antiquated. It's one of the few things where you have to, it seems like you have to go to the front desk to get something. There's always a line. There's always a staff of two. It seems preposterous, but in hotels have a high manual labor workflow where rooms get cleaned, food gets prepared, all things are measured, I think, or probably a computer interface that creates the order, and then a computer interface that says the order's been completed. Do you see process intelligence expanding beyond just computer systems? Is it gonna get into manual labor where, I don't know, is it going to require sensors or what to figure out what's going on?
It's an interesting question. I think if you look at sort of current state, process discovery industry, just about every use case you see and read is from the, financial and accounting practices area.
Yeah.
I've been suckered into many a webinar that says, come listen to hear how our process discovery works in the, pharmaceutical drug discovery area. And they have one line about that. And then they immediately go into, let's look at an order to cash process. And you're like, hang on, I got snookered on that one. Our technology is flexible enough that we see use cases across the enterprise and also across industries. So we see a bunch of work in HR. We see a lot of work on the customer facing side. One of our largest clients is in the media and advertising space. And you wouldn't think of them as normally being, somebody who'd be a heavy user of process technology. They're in a creative industry, they're in a very agile industry, but, they are very data driven. So they see the need for it. And I talked to them. I said, hey, why are you guys using our stuff? And they said, because you're the only technology right now that can look across every application, every department, every service area. You're not just stuck in this financial and accounting practices area. And we need that because we're a bit more creative, a bit more agile, a bit more diverse in that area. I think, others will catch up. But right now we've got this advantage and we're going to take advantage of it. Our biggest clients are, on the retail side, consumer packaged goods, all over the place. It's not limited to the traditional healthcare and financial services. We've got a mining company over in the Ukraine that's a big user of us.
Oh, wow.
Folks all over the globe.
Well, I'll tell you what, that marketing agency work, I think, is an interesting area. I know they are very, very much so focused on gathering data and reform. Like it's just a manual process. I can tell you that much. I wish I had it back when I worked in the software industry, because when I was in the software industry, we did marketing, and agencies were our customers. And the amount of hours they spend pulling data out of disparate sources to then give a report back to a customer, it's pretty mind-boggling, actually, because most of these tools aren't designed to talk to other tools. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you suggested, it's quite manual in the process. So yeah, I think that's an interesting field that you named, because I think I can see that 100% expanding significantly. Right now, though, Jon, it's time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to us by the Salesforce platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Jon, this is where we ask you questions outside of work so our audience can get to know you a little better. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. And then this is a personal question, but it kind of crosses over into work. Have you used any forms of automation to make your personal life easier?
No. I'm trying to think. No, I don't think so.
You probably have. It's called outsourcing. Whenever you have something, most people, that's what they do. They outsource something. I mean, I'm sure you've outsourced at minimum an oil change.
I was thinking more on the technology side. I took this job at FortressIQ March 6th of last year, and I was supposed to be on the road 3 to 4 weeks a month. And a week later, the world shut down, and I haven't left my spare bedroom yet. So, a lot of my time has been focused on the work angle, and not the personal automation side.
You made a comment about it. What's one of the things you're looking forward to when, let's say, all the travel restrictions start lifting and people feel more confident going about daily lives? What's one of the things you most look forward to returning?
I think going out to dinner, seeing friends and family again on a regular basis. I think that's been the biggest challenge over the past year. You can only have so many Zoom virtual cocktail, with your old high school buddies, and every now and then you got to get in person and relive the glory days instead of staring at a screen all day.
All right, now I got to ask, the glory days. What's something glorious you used to do that you feel like you need to pick back up?
Glorious that I used to do.
Well, or just miss doing.
I think, the one area that's been sort of crazy over the past years is the lack of, sort of getting big groups of people together.
Yeah.
And you think about like going to a football game, and it's been so long now, I can't imagine myself going to, college, professional, whatever it is, with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people in some cases. And I think, going back to that type of activity, or going to a concert on the music side, seems so foreign right now to me, but it's just a total mind shift in terms of, how we operate now and how we think, in this new environment that we're living in.
You kind of shared it earlier. It sounds like you're a big sports fan. You used a sports analogy now. Again, you mentioned the Patriots earlier. Are you a big football fan, big sports fan?
I'm a decent sports fan. I got a son who plays a lot of ice hockey, so I see a lot of ice hockey games, to be honest with you.
So then you and I have that in common. I have a son that plays ice hockey too. So I know that, there's a lot of money that goes into that. That's sad.
That's why I can't go on vacation.
Have you ever calculated how much, you don't have to tell me the number. Have you ever calculated how much money you spend on your son in a calendar year for ice hockey?
Oh, hey, I think about it all the time. That's a lot.
For those parents out there that it's a great activity, but if you don't want to swing a lot of cash, do not get your kid into ice hockey. It costs. The tournaments, between tournaments, travel, Jon knows the pain.
Oh,
it adds up.
Yep.
Oh, and like advanced skates. How old's your son that plays?
16.
Okay, so he's in the range where like the top level skates at his age group are like $1,000.
Oh yeah, so it's like I think he bought new skates. He fortunately stopped growing a little bit. His last pair of skates I think were like $800.
Yeah.
3 years ago. He didn't get the top of the line, which are, $1,100, $1,200. He's like, I might outgrow these. I'm like, you better not.
There you go. That is a fine piece of advice for all you adults out there. if you're thinking about having kids and you don't want to spend a lot of money on their activities, do not go down LifeChanging. Although I have enjoyed every moment of it. And it sounds like you have as well.
It's a lot of fun and seeing the kids be able to get out there. And that's what really, my son's team did not really get shut down during COVID. I'm up in Virginia and they were able to skate almost all last year. And I think that's the one thing that kept his sanity, because the virtual school got to be a challenge, to say the least.
No doubt about it. Now I got to ask, which team does your son play for? Do you play for St. James?
Oh, you know the area.
Yeah.
He played last year for the Potomac Patriots on their USPHL U16 team. So
that's awesome.
Normally we'd spend a lot of time heading up north to, Boston, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, but we got in most of the season, but stayed fairly local almost all year. That's
awesome. Hey, listen, everyone, if you get a chance, look up St. James in Springfield, Virginia. It's an unbelievable facility.
Yeah, no, it's about as nice as you can get.
There you go. Jon, I appreciate you joining us today on IT Visionaries. Thanks for sharing all that you're doing inside of Process Intelligence. Thanks for sharing some of the use cases your customers are using. And it was awesome talking to you about your, philosophy and your belief of what's going to happen in the future. I agree with you. Digital transformation is not that. I don't think there's an end game. I think it's going to be endless. People are going to constantly try to improve their business from here until infinity. There will be no stop.
Thank you very much, Albert. Appreciate the conversation.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.